Good morning. Happy New Year, Bright City. It is so good to be with you all this morning as we kick off another year together. This morning is Vision Sunday. We start each year kind of casting some vision for where we see ourselves going as a church. But this morning, I wanted to start by just reflecting a little bit on the end of 2025. I took some time off from preaching at the end of 2025, and there were a couple of reasons for that. One is that in September of last year, we actually hit our 7-year mark as a church, which was just a huge milestone. We can celebrate that for sure. But I realized across those 7 years, I don't know that I'd gone more than about 4 weeks without preaching. And so felt like this was a good opportunity to take some time away from preaching, to let that muscle rest and relax and renew. But also, last year was just a very full year. 2025, there was a lot that we did as a church, as a staff. And I want to share some of those in a moment. But my inclination can be to just jump into what's next and immediately start thinking about, okay, what's next? Where are we going next? What are we doing next? And not take time to rest or to celebrate. And so wanted to take some intentional time as well to take some time to rest, to celebrate, but also to take some time to reflect over 2025. And 2025 was an interesting year. In many ways, it was a wonderful year. But to kind of go back to the beginning of 2025, I turned 40 in January. And so that kind of has its own like psychological effect on you as a human being. If you've been there, you know what I'm talking about. Mortality, you start seeing that in a whole new way. Just everything. It's a new reality that you see things through. And so kind of processing that, but also really beginning to wrestle with my own sense of calling in ministry. And in particular, trying to, be very clear about what is it precisely that God is calling me to do and be as a part of the body. What I'm talking about is in Scripture, one of the images that it uses to talk about the church is that the church is like a body, where the church is one, but it's made up of many different parts. And each of those parts has a role to play. So the whole thing can't be an eye, because then where would the sense of hearing be? And the whole thing can't be an ear, because where would the sense of smell be? And so really thinking through, okay, what uniquely is my role? And one of the gems that came out of that time of reflection for me, and maybe this sounds a bit harsh, but a part of what I realized was that for much of the last 20 years, so when I started student ministry in 2005 and started my first job, since then, a major aspect of my wrestling with God has been me trying to tell God which part of the body I wanted to be. The one that I thought was most important, most valuable, whatever it may be. And some of that's natural, right? We're in our process of kind of discerning what gifts God has put in us, what strengths He's given us, what things we need to develop. But also, there needs to be a willingness in moments of clarity to surrender. To say, you know what, I'm trying to force something that isn't who you made me. And for me to continue to force that is not only hurting me, it's hurting the body. Alongside of this, I think one of the things that you've probably gathered from my preaching is that it's really important for me to have a sense of meaning and purpose in what I do. That there's a lot about what I do that it has to have that connection with meaning and purpose. And I'll say at the same time that those things don't always come easy for me. Often they do not come easily for me. I have to be very intentional about thinking about how what I'm doing provides a sense of meaning and purpose. What I'm learning in fresh ways is how embracing the part of the body that I was made to be frees me and frees us from that agonizing pursuit and struggle to prove that I am a certain part of the body, or to tell God which part of the body I am, or to think that I should be, and frees me to fully embrace and invest myself in becoming the best that I can be at the part of the body that I am called to be, and the same for you. I'm also learning there can be a remarkable sense of peace and satisfaction and purpose and meaning in acknowledging, okay, this is what you made me to do. And so I tell you all of that right here at the beginning of 2026 to say that I am committing to you, Bright City, to pursuing with as much clarity as possible how I can best serve Bright City according to who God made and called me to be. And one of the things that I've observed as I've reflected on this and thought about this is that one of the things that we have been blessed with at Bright City is an incredible staff. We have incredible people on staff. And I think a part of what I'm learning is a part of my role is learning how do I make that team work together for the greatest good at Bright City, maximizing their gifts, unleashing them for what it is specifically God put in them and the role that they are supposed to play. And so I want to tell you, I'm so excited about this upcoming year. I'm excited about what God has in store for us as a church. I'm excited to hone in on this role more because I think God has great things for us as a community. I'm excited for us to enter into that together. Also, after not preaching for the last couple of months, I'm excited to be back in the saddle, as it were, this morning and to share about where we're headed. But I first want to take some time and think back to all the things that we did in 2025. Back to the beginning of 2025, we installed our first elder board. That is something we've been working to for a long time. Yeah, let's celebrate that. That is one of the ways that we are building out our leadership structure here, both to carry the weight of leading a church, but also to be better shepherds of our community. We work to improve and to change and transform our volunteer culture by creating some new habits around our Sunday mornings and our Sunday morning huddle. We overhauled our process to help people make Bright City home by creating some new steps for engagement, like New to Bright City, Discover Bright City, Grow at Bright City, and Belong. We very intentionally pivoted to impacting our community and our city by creating events and contexts that people outside of Bright City would love to be a part of and would be blessed by. We very intentionally focused our efforts and resources on partnering with Housing for New Hope to maximize our impact in helping people in our city find long-term housing. We saw our student ministry absolutely take off over the last 12 months. We've seen our worship team grow and expand and pursue excellence. We launched our Alpha course, which is just this incredibly free and safe place for people who are curious about Jesus, who have questions about Jesus, to come and share openly and honestly, to work through some of those questions. We launched our first ever marriage course to invest in the marriages in our community. And at the end of last year, we launched the Prepare Initiative, our 2-year giving initiative to strengthen the foundation of what God has already been building at Bright City, but also to be building the future as we prepare for what God has for us next. So, a lot of things happened in 2025. At the beginning of last year, Sharon set before us some specific goals that we wanted to hit by 2027. One of those was that we wanted to be at a point where we were helping 100 people or 100 families a year move into permanent housing through our partnership with Housing for New Hope. We set a financial goal that each year we would be investing $100,000 back into our community through partnerships like Housing for New Hope and World Relief. And then she challenged us to begin to pray about who maybe God has put in our life for us to help them find and follow Jesus. Who can we begin praying for? And so I wanted to share with you a little bit of an update. In 2025, we've reinvested $70,000 back into our community. I think we can celebrate that as we make way towards that goal of $100,000 a year. We packed 100 hygiene kits for families moving back into permanent housing, which is huge. That's one part of that process for people moving back into homes, and so we want to continue that. And so it's been a full year, and I feel like I need to take a nap after just talking about all that we did in 2025. But as we look to 2026 and talk about our year coming up, I want to talk a little bit about vision. What is vision? I think it's helpful for us to be all on the same page when we think about vision for a church. And the best way that I know to think about vision is that vision is a preferred future. When we think about the future of our church a year out, what is it that we imagine? What do we picture it being? What is our preferred outcome? To give you an example of this, when we began moving into our offices over on Fayetteville Road and leasing those offices, they looked kind of like you would expect most offices look. They were kind of drab. They weren't very bright. They needed some lightening up. They needed some love. And Sharon, I have to tell you, absolutely had a vision for this space, for what it would look like, for what colors we needed to use, what kind of furniture we needed, all of that stuff, to the point where now that it's done, we have people who come in and say, this must be such an inspiring place to work. And so she absolutely had a vision for our offices, and that vision included a vision for my office. I did not have a vision for my office, and I just wanted to get furniture in my office so I could start working. And so I went out and purchased chairs and a desk and all of that good stuff. And I have to tell you, by the time Sharon was done executing her vision for my office, I had returned all of that furniture because I did not have a vision for it. But Sharon could see it in her mind what she wanted that to be. And as we think about 2026 and our year coming, what do we envision this year entailing? What is our preferred future for Bright City? As you think about your own life, you probably have some desired vision for your life, a preferred future. Maybe it's related to your job or to your family and what that would look like, or sort of what your time looks like, the amount of time you spend working versus time with family and friends. You probably have a preferred financial future or a preferred relational future. Maybe you have a preferred place that you would like to be in your faith. All of that contributes to your vision for your life. And in the same way, we have a vision, a preferred future for Bright City that we want to talk a little bit about this morning. As we do that, though, I want to be very upfront with you guys that vision has not always been an easy thing for me. It has actually been quite a tricky thing for me personally. And so I wanted to share a little bit of my journey around this idea of vision, because I think many of you maybe identify with what I'm about to share and may even be at Bright City because you instinctively identify with what I'm about to say. But vision statements have been tricky for me, especially those that entailed concrete numerical goals, for a couple of reasons. They've been triggering for me because first, they seem to reek of ego. That ultimately this is just about sort of that pastor and what that pastor can accomplish and really what they can say later and brag about. And so it's always made me a little bit uncomfortable to have some of those specific numbers. I also know how numbers can produce manipulative ministry tactics, and that we can pursue those good ends with some less than great means and cross lines on the way to them. And so those goals, sometimes I've come away from them asking, okay, but to what end? What is the ultimate purpose of this beyond just your ego or saying that we achieved a certain goal? What is this really about? And so I want to share a little bit of my journey of processing this idea of vision with you so that, one, you know where I'm coming from as I share this morning, but also maybe you share some of my reservations and maybe you will find this helpful. As we started out this morning during our scripture reading, we read what maybe is a very familiar passage for you. It comes from Matthew 28. Jesus is about to ascend to heaven, and he gives his disciples sort of a vision for what they're supposed to do next. He gives them this statement that kind of casts, here's what I want you to go and do now. Verse 19 of Matthew 28 says this. It says, "Go therefore and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe everything I have commanded." These couple of verses have traditionally been known as the Great Commission. This vision that Jesus gives his disciples to go and make other disciples, to baptize them, to teach them what he has commanded. And as important as this statement is, there's still the question for me of to what end? Yes, it's great for there to be more disciples, but what are they supposed to do besides just waiting for heaven? What is it that they're supposed to do? To what end do we make these disciples? And so there's two other elements in the Gospels that we are introduced to that I think help flesh out to what end we do this work. The second of these is the Great Commandments. So we have the Great Commission and then the Great Commandments. In Matthew chapter 22, we see Jesus is being questioned again by some of the religious leaders, and they're constantly trying to test him. And so in Matthew chapter 22, it says, when the Pharisees, who were a group of religious leaders, heard that he had silenced the Sadducees, who are another group of religious leaders, one of them, an expert of the law, asked a question to test Jesus. Teacher, which command in the law is the greatest? Jesus said to him, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the greatest and most important command. The second is like it. Love your neighbor as yourself. So we're beginning to see this picture that we're given the Great Commission to go and make disciples in order to teach them what? What he's commanded, most importantly, the greatest commandments of loving God and loving neighbor. But again, to what end? Just so they know what they are? Or is there something else, a greater end? That leads us then to the third element, which is the great compassion. In Matthew chapter 9, Matthew gives us a summary of Jesus' ministry to that point. And it says, Jesus continued going around to all the towns and villages, teaching in their synagogues, preaching the good news of the kingdom, and healing every disease and every sickness. When he saw the crowds, he felt compassion for them because they were distressed and dejected like sheep without a shepherd. Another way of translating that is that they were harassed and scattered, cast out, marginalized, set aside. And so what we see is that Jesus is demonstrating great compassion for them, not just spiritually, but in their bodily, physical, social circumstances. He felt compassion for them. Then he said to his disciples, the harvest is abundant, but the workers are few. Therefore, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send out workers into his harvest. As we come to this great compassion, what we see is how this ultimately is oriented towards that great compassion, that we go and make disciples, baptize them, and teach them the great commandments of loving God and loving neighbor so that they will live out his great compassion. Now, there's a very specific reason why it matters that we live out this great compassion. And why this great compassion, I think, is integral for our vision for 2026, and that is the church's credibility. I think one of the greatest obstacles for us making disciples in our world today is the church's credibility or lack thereof. But what I want to tell you, and what I'm going to tell you next, is critical for understanding why our vision for 2026 matters. I've been reading a book by a man named George Hunter called The Celtic Way of Evangelism, How Christianity Can Reach the West Again. And in there, he shares research on 4 reasons he commonly finds that people question the credibility of Christians. 4 common questions that he finds people ask. The first of these is, do they really believe what they say they believe? Do they really believe it? Or they just believe it because it's convenient, because it's beneficial in some way? He said, not everybody questions whether they believe it, but some question, do they really live by what they believe? He says, I don't doubt that they believe it, but do they really live by it? Does it determine their priorities, their way of living? But these next 2 that he mentions are the critical ones for me. He said, some don't ask whether they really live by it or not, but they wonder, would it really make any difference in my life if I followed Jesus? Would it really make any difference to the things that I'm going through, the things that I'm suffering, the relational pain that I'm experiencing? Would following Jesus really make any difference in my life? And then 4th, the last question, and he said this is a more recent question, but it's becoming more and more common, is the question, can Christianity really make a difference in the world? Can it really make any difference in the world, especially as it relates to struggles around justice, reconciliation, peace, and care for creation? Can it really make any difference? And so the reason I mention those is because as I've wrestled with this idea of vision, and where we want to go as a church this year. What I've learned and what I want to say to you in as non-cliche a way as possible is that when I'm really honest with myself, the truth is I do want people to be learning that following Jesus really does make a difference in their life. I want people to be learning that. I want us to be operating as a church in a way that we are helping people discover that. And I do want to see our church grow because, one, healthy things grow. That's what they do. But I want to see us grow to what end? I want to see us grow because as we grow, we can increase our capacity to do good in our city, to impact our city for good. I want to see people taking steps towards Christ, steps like baptism, because that declares publicly what God is doing in them personally. I want to see our community growing because I want to see more people learning the great commandments of loving God and loving neighbor so that they will then go and live out his great compassion. I want Bright City to be mobilizing more and more people in our city around efforts at justice and reconciliation and equity and alleviating poverty and homelessness. Another way of saying that is I want to be answering the prayer that Jesus asked us to pray in Matthew 9 to send out workers. And so these goals, the goals that I'm going to share with you this morning, help us to know if we're being effective in what God is calling us to do. Back at the end of 2024, we began working with a consultant just to help us assess how we were doing as a church. Where were we doing well? Where were we healthy? Where were we strong? But also, where did we need to grow? Where did we have some growing edges, some things to work on and to improve? And a couple of things came out of that. The first thing that we saw as we looked at some of the data from our church is that one of the things that we have not done a great job at is reaching people who do not already know Jesus. A lot of people who come to Bright City, which is a great thing, but they already have some relationship with Jesus. And so we needed to grow in our ability to engage our community in ways that people that didn't already know Jesus would be curious and interested in learning more, of investigating this, of what it means to know Jesus. And the second thing is, looking at our city, we are able to see that, and I think this is true in a lot of our nation, but people in our city in particular want to know that the church is making a difference. They want to know that the church is a part of making a difference and working for good. And so when we're setting goals and casting vision for the future of Bright City, we want to make sure that these things are about more than us, that they're about something bigger than Bright City. And so the reason that our vision for the Prepare Initiative, our vision for 2026, 2027, and beyond, the reason that they matter is because of those last two questions around credibility. That we want people to know that following Jesus really does make a difference in their lives. And so seeing things like baptisms means seeing people coming to know that Jesus really does make a difference in their lives, that we're helping people discover that. But we also want to see our community grow numerically because we want to grow our capacity as a church to demonstrate how following the way of Jesus really can change the world. That as we increase our capacity to do good, it demonstrates the church's capacity to change the world. So what is our vision, our preferred future for 2026? Well, the way that I want to frame this up for you, I mentioned earlier that one of the ways that Scripture talks about the church is as a body, a human body. And when I think about a human body has two hands. And when it comes to us as a church, I want to make sure that we are reaching out to our community with both hands. What I mean by that is reaching out with both hands, the hand of compassion and justice, as well as the hand of invitation and evangelism. We want to make sure that we're reaching out to our community with both hands. And we want to set some concrete objectives with both of those. When it comes to that hand of invitation and evangelism, one of the things that we want to see happen as a church is we want to see 25 people take that step of baptism this year. We want to see them take that step because we want to know that we are actually helping people discover that knowing Jesus makes a difference in their lives. That we're actually helping people learn that. This is a part of why we're doing Alpha, and we'll continue to do Alpha, is that it is this great space for people who are curious about faith and Jesus, who have questions, who want to learn more. They can come and ask those questions and know that there is not judgment or ridicule, but it is a safe place for all of that. And so I want to encourage you, on your way out, there will be cards like this on the bar in the lobby. I want to encourage you to grab one of these if there's somebody in your life who might be interested in being a part of that, or maybe you yourself are in that place and want to learn more. You have questions, some things that you're curious about, of what it means to follow Jesus and what Jesus means to you. I want to encourage you to join us in that journey. But I also want to see our church inviting others to be a part of this. And not to necessarily hit some specific numerical goal, but to see more people working together, linking arms to help usher in the justice, peace, hope, joy, and life of the kingdom. So that our goals are not ends in themselves, but are milestones in doing our part to see his kingdom come and his will be done. When it comes to that hand of compassion and justice, we want to continue our goal towards reinvesting $100,000 a year in our community through partnerships like Housing for New Hope and World Relief. And so we want to continue in that direction, and we've budgeted $75,000 this year to go towards that, but my hope is that we get into the year that we can even increase that we get closer to $90,000 as we do that. That we would continue to make progress towards helping 100 people a year move into long-term housing. But my specific vision for you specifically as a person who calls Bright City home, my preferred future for you is that every person who calls Bright City home would serve our community in at least one way this year. By serving in one of our serve days, by working with one of the organizations that we partner with, by working with your small group with one of these organizations. But I want to encourage you to think intentionally about where you are going to serve this year. I'm not talking about on one of our serve teams in a way that benefits Bright City. I'm talking about serving our community in a way that demonstrates the church's ability to change the world. And all of that is because I want Bright City's reputation in our city to be that we are a church that shows up for our city. That when people think about Bright City, they know that we are a church that shows up for its community. These two hands that we reach out to our community with, they work in tandem. And I know each of us probably has what we might call our dominant hand. Right? Our hand that we are more comfortable with. But we are called to use both hands. And so, church, this is where each and every one of you come into play. That Bright City's preferred future is not something that just the staff makes happen. It's not something that the elders make happen, or even our serve teams. This requires every part of the body playing its role. It demands each of us being a part of this. And so I want to take us back to what I shared about credibility as we bring this to a close, to go back to George Hunter's research, because at the end of the day, he said that the thing that is defining criteria for credibility is, are they willing to suffer for what they believe? Are they willing to sacrifice for what they believe? Are you willing to sacrifice for what you believe? When the rubber hits the road, when following Jesus gets hard, when it's no longer convenient to just believe these things, when it's no longer beneficial to believe these things, do you lean in or do you back off? Are you willing to suffer setback in career because your priorities are driven by more than just the career ladder? Are you willing to suffer disadvantage because you refuse to cut corners or sacrifice integrity? Are you willing to suffer misunderstanding and maligning when following the way of Jesus means departing from the line our political party asks us to toe? Are you willing to suffer not keeping up with the Joneses because you embrace the generous way of Jesus? Are you willing to suffer humiliation when, to the dismay of those around us who find faith untenable, you embrace the name of Jesus with confidence and humility and peace? This is not just a call for those of us who call Bright City home. Wherever you are coming from this morning, this is a call for all of us who answer the call to follow Jesus. And so as we begin 2026 together, I want us to begin the year with a little bit of a credibility check. Where do you find yourself this morning as it pertains to these 4 questions? As we reflect at the beginning of the year, where do you find yourself? Do you really believe what you say you believe? Do you really live by what you believe? When you take a look at your life, is it in alignment with what you say you believe? On a more personal level, this idea of, does Jesus make a difference in my life? Have you actually allowed Jesus into your life in a way that Jesus can make the difference that he wants to make? Because sometimes we kind of set limits and we say, Jesus, don't go there. That's off limits. Have we really let Jesus into our lives in a way that he can make a difference? And then lastly, do your current priorities make it possible for Jesus to use you to change the world? Do your current priorities make it possible for Jesus to use you, or do they get in the way of that? How do these questions square with where you are this morning? I want to invite you to just take a moment to bow your heads. We're going to create some space to pray, to reflect together. We're going to have our prayer team available if you want someone to pray with you as you reflect on these questions. But the good news is that wherever you find yourself this morning, Jesus is waiting. He's inviting you to come back to him. If you need to come back to him this morning, it's never too late. And there's no time like the beginning of a new year to take that step, to come back to him. Jesus, we thank you for what you call us to be a part of, that we get to be a part of demonstrating your great compassion to the world around us. I pray, God, that as a church, as we embark on this new year together, that we would be each challenged individually to think about the role that we are called to play in this. What it looks like for us to leverage our gifts, our strengths, our abilities, our time, our resources, so that the world around us would experience that compassion. Jesus, would you just come and meet us wherever we find ourselves this morning? Come and meet us.